Cognitive biases are automatic mental shortcuts, heuristics, that allow the brain to make decisions quickly. But in the corporate world, these snap judgments introduce systematic, costly errors into risk assessment and investment. When faced with this problem, the standard corporate response is to send executives to a bias awareness training seminar. But awareness does not equal immunity. Claiming you make unbiased decisions because you took a single course is like eating one apple and claiming you have a healthy diet. Biases are automatic biological responses, known as System 1 thinking. They are hardwired into our brains, meaning you cannot simply train them away. Because human intuition is naturally flawed, organizations cannot rely on willpower to prevent poor investments. They have to out-process bias by replacing intuitive reasoning with formal, structural, analytical tools. The first procedural step to guide decision-makers away from their gut feelings is a process called risk ranking. It converts a risk engineer's subjective assessment into consistent, quantitative data on a rigid 0 to 4 scale. This provides decision-makers, and the insurance underwriters who price these risks, with a fact-based, independent view. This standardized scoring is then applied across specific comparable categories, evaluating hardware, software, and emergency control features. But clean numbers still leave a vulnerability. Because of confirmation and stability bias, an executive who spent their career in the maintenance department might still subconsciously over-allocate funds toward maintenance, ignoring other critical needs. Quantitative data is necessary, but it isn't enough on its own. To completely remove internal bias, organizations must look outward and contextualize their data using industry benchmarking. When comparing data, decision-makers have to be careful to avoid the selection bias trap. During World War II, the military asked statistician Abraham Wald to analyze where to reinforce returning bomber planes to minimize future losses. The military looked at the returning planes sitting on the runway and decided to add armor to the areas covered in bullet holes. Wald realized this logic was backwards. The planes on the tarmac survived specifically because they weren't hit in critical areas like the engines. The planes that took hits to the engines never made it back. This historical lesson applies directly to corporate benchmarking. If a company only compares its performance to successful peers, the ones that survived, they are looking at a fatally incomplete dataset. True objective benchmarking requires a full-spectrum database. You have to capture both the poor and the excellent global performers to reveal actual risk correlations, rather than misleading artifacts. This is a quartile benchmarking chart. It maps a company's true position against that full global spectrum. Look at the top section, the overall benchmarking scores. The horizontal bars define the industry standard, spanning from poor on the left to excellent on the right. A specific company's score is plotted as a distinct circle on these bars, establishing their exact relative position within the market. Now, look down here. Let's imagine a company has a raw score of 2.5 in maintenance, which places them in the top quartile globally. But they have a higher raw score of 2.8 in process layout, which sits in the bottom quartile globally. Where should the CFO invest? The investment must go to process layout. Despite the higher raw numerical score, the benchmark proves the company is severely lagging behind the industry standard in that specific category. This visual mapping directly debiases capital allocation. It shifts the decision away from a manager's personal preference and roots it firmly in the objective reality of industry risk. Stripping personal bias out of the boardroom delivers a tangible return. It allows executives to confidently justify capital expenditures based on objective industry reality, rather than internal office politics. Because this data is grounded in the same metrics used by external risk analysts, companies with high benchmark scores can prove their risk quality to underwriters, securing more competitive insurance rates. This process builds a system bypassing human fallibility. Acknowledging biological limits and stripping subjectivity from initial data, we look past survival stories and use global benchmarks to see exactly where the next investment must go. Guarding against cognitive bias does not require more willpower, and it doesn't rely on better intuition. It requires the disciplined implementation